might have been a mistake. I've been really good up till now. Would you ask Ashley to turn that off now? Thank you, Reverend David King. That was a lovely service. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Known Chris for a long time. One of the first things that he said to me when we were talking, he said, "Nobody come to my funeral." Well, I guess we sure showed him. So, Christopher William Parrish. Tall, dark, oh, I gotta back up. This is my tree. Mark is my tree. Tall, dark, and handsome. Used to be dark, but every time I went away, he'd get into some sort of trouble. And it was usually shaving his head, and I hated it. And he knew I hated it, so he'd wait till I go away, which was very often, and he'd shave his head. And he was still dark at that time. I love a shaved head, by the way, Paul. But my son, Paul. But anyway, he would shave his head just when I was gone, and he'd also find things to get into, like I bought myself an iron, a really expensive iron. It was well over $100 for Christmas. And then I went to see my sister in Florida and left my iron on the table. Big mistake, because he gets that iron and he decides he has to, I forgot them. I forgot to bring his hats. He would iron his hats. I don't know where I left his hats. Anyway, so he'd get into trouble like that. So this week has been really tough, but anyway, we're getting there. He's been sick for a very, very long time in different ways, and he's survived sepsis 3 times. His mobility issues got worse and worse as he went along. He survived COVID, pneumonia a number of times, and yet and congestive heart failure, which you don't usually come back from, but Chris did. He was on a palliative care program for 2 years, or not, pardon me, for 2 years, but usually the palliative care program, when he was in the hospital, he'd come home and they'd say, well, you're coming home and you're gonna die in 3 to 6 months. So they put him on a palliative care program, and the doctor came in to see him all the time, which was absolutely wonderful. For a couple of years, we've had a doctor coming to the house, Dr. Moulay, and that's been really great, but Chris outlived the expectation that he was gonna die. So they didn't know what to do with this. So they kind of put him on a chronic program until the next time he went in the hospital, and then he'd go back onto the palliative care program. So 2 things were easy for me this week. One of them was picking up a picture of Chris, and the other one was so easy I can't remember what it was, the song, Our Love. Our Love was our song, and he asked the DJ who married us to play Our Love. And the DJ either couldn't find it or chose not to play it, but he didn't play it. And Chris is loud and boisterous, and he was very upset that his song wasn't played. And I was trying to calm him down, because I wanted the DJ, I wanted to dance, and we weren't gonna have it if he wanted to do what he wanted to do, which was get rid of the DJ. The other thing was picking out the picture that I chose for today. And that all along, I've known him since 99 or 2000, and we got married in 2012. About, 6 months later, we went on a little honeymoon together. And we were going to actually my great niece's wedding in Florida. But we went on this little cruise. My son Paul, at Christmas time, he said, Mom, I like all your Christmas cards, but why have you got one there from Roy Nichols, the automotive place? And I said, well, if I buy a car next week, we're gonna get a free cruise.
Oh.
So we got the free cruise, and we went on the free cruise, which it wasn't easy to get Chris to travel, but he did go to Florida and that with me. So we were on this free cruise, and I saw a photographer who I liked, who I thought was taking good pictures. So, you don't have to stand away from me.
Oh. I just want to give you lots of space. You're good.
So, I didn't tell Chris, but I booked a session for us to get our pictures done before we went for supper that night, because I knew we were getting dressed up for supper. You get dressed up and you go for supper. And it wasn't all that easy to get Chris dressed up either, so anyway, we were all dressed up and we were going for supper, and we got our pictures done. And if anyone's been on a cruise in the old days, they used to have the big photo gallery, and you'd have to go there and you'd have to try and find your picture, and it wasn't the easiest thing to do. So we enjoyed our supper, and then I said to Chris, will you come with me to the photo gallery and we'll pick out our pictures? He said, no. No, I'm not going there. So we probably went for a smoke and then back to the room, and when I came back to the room, I looked at him and I said, well, I picked out our funeral pictures. Had them done on canvas. So there was no issue with that, it was easy. So I knew exactly what to do as far as that went. I wanted to say special tribute. I'm First Nation, I'm Native. Thanks, David, for coming, and I spoke to the chief. They put it on the Alderville First Nation website about Chris, and they lowered the flags to half-mast. I thought, and that was just so great. He bought a farm out there shortly after we met. There was no house on the farm. And so of course, he drove me by this house he thought I might want to buy, so I did, out there, so that he lived on the reserve. Him and Bert lived on the reserve, and I was there on weekends, part-time. I was working in Oshawa. And so he was a big member of the community, really, and that was a real special honor that they lowered the flags for. He used to, as he started farming, he started from nothing. It wasn't his first time though, been about 3 times, but he came back to do farming once more. We had to go to the sale barn and buy animals. He had to plant the fields and that, and he was doing it all himself. He didn't have any equipment or anything. He saw a used tractor go by on a flatbed. He thought, oh, I think I'll buy that tractor, so he did. So he had the tractor up on the hill, and he and Bert were up there chit-chatting, talking about the tractor, you know, what a good deal it was and a good find and everything else, until the tractor went roaring down the hill and those guys following, running
He
after.
said, don't tell anybody about it.
I gotta tell something else that he said, don't tell.
You did.
Yeah. Yeah, you did and I did. And he grew crops. He grew hay mostly. So he had his animals, and he grew hay all around Alderville, rented fields on native land. And of course, the natives decided that they were gonna have a protest and shut down Highway 45. So it's not easy to shut down a highway unless you steal Chris's hay and use it for a blockade and set it on fire. Well, that didn't go well with Chris. And the chief at that time was Jim Bob. My sister worked on the reserve as a librarian, and Jim Bob said to my sister, he said, you gotta call Nadine, you gotta get her out here, you gotta settle that man down. So by the time I got out there, he was making a hay wagon, and he was just hammering just as hard as he could. But he got over it. He got over it. Excuse me. Dry mouth. So cows that we bought, went to the sale barn, part of our entertainment. And we bought cows, usually one at a time to start with. We bought Stepmama. We named all the cows. We never put any of them in the freezer. He took them to the sale barn to sell them, but we didn't need them, so we could name them. So we named them Stepmama. She had a baby, but her baby died, unfortunately. So of course, Chris, being the guy he was, he went to the sale barn to buy a new baby for stepmama. And then he had to rub the deceased one on the new one so that the mama would take this baby and feed the baby. And she did. She raised that baby, stepmama. And then when we bought it, I don't know, Horde Station or something, we called it 10. We bought Crazy Mama. Crazy Mama was a little bit, well, he knew by the time we got her home why they called her crazy, why they sold her, because she was unpredictable. So Crazy Mama had a calf, and Chris went into the barnyard to needle the calf, which you have to do, vaccinate him right away. And that Crazy Mama would have nothing to do with Chris coming in there. So she picked him up with her horns by the seat of his pants and threw him against the tree, or threw him against the fence. And he thought, oh boy, he was done, but she left him alone. We did a lot of fishing out on Lake Ontario, which was really good in our first years, because we did a lot of talking. Can't do much, you're sitting there for hours waiting for the fish to bite. When they do bite, 2 of them at a time bite, usually, so it gets crazy, but for quite a while you're just sitting there. So we knew each other from just sitting there talking about things. There are a few people here missing today, and they're just choosing to mourn, or it's some reasons that they can't be here, but all that's okay. All that's okay, because Chris is with each and every one of them in spirit that isn't here. So when I moved to town, when I bought the house in Port Hope, Chris and I, turbulent relationship, we got engaged. Margie was the first one to know. We got engaged, and Chris decided he wasn't spending another night alone. So he moved into Port Hope with me. He did spend one more night though alone, and what happened was he decided to take the boat, and he was gonna go visit his brothers at the cottage. And I had no issue with this, and I didn't know if he was coming home or not. He didn't know if he was coming home or not. We didn't come home that night. But he wasn't at the cottage with his brothers. He put the boat in the lake at Lindsay, and then I guess they'd had a few and they were having a good time, and on his way back, he got the boat hung up on some rocks. And he couldn't call out. There were people around, like other cottages, but because of what he'd been doing, drinking or whatever, he couldn't call out, so he crawled into the front of the boat, and it was cool, it was in the fall, and he slept there all night. So when he came home in the morning, he was so happy. I don't think I've ever seen him so happy to see me before. He was so happy to be home and climb into bed. So when he moved into Port Hope, his tractor came with him. He used the tractor to trim trees. He went on the boulevard and he dug up a big cornerstone rock and he placed it in front of my house. It was at the side of the house that we didn't even know was there, which was really nice. He used this tractor, as you can see in some of the pictures, in the garden, in the backyard. Like, he just couldn't take the farmer out of him. Not that I wanted to. And he went to some fields after that. One day Bert came in the house, and Chris had been doing some work in the backyard, which I pay no attention to. I'll go out there and harvest whatever he's got, but I'm not the weeder, and I just was not involved in any of that. So Bert came in one day, and Chris and I were sitting there, and Bert says, "Dad, I didn't know you had chickens." I looked at him and I said, "Do we have chickens?" He said, "Well, did you know we had chickens?" I said, "No." And he said, "Well, we've had them for about 3 months now." So he told me there were 12 chickens. I said, "We can't have chickens." He said, "Why not?" And I said, "Well, there's got to be a bylaw or something." Yeah. So anyway, there was no bylaw against having chickens, but the bylaw officer, the police came up one day. They said, "You got chickens?" I just pointed to the backyard where Chris was, so he went to the back. Chris had told me there were 12 chickens. Well, I guess he bought a rooster at the sale barn by accident. He said they cut off the tail feathers. he bought this rooster, so the rooster was like a harvest moon. The rooster crowed all night long, and of course the neighbors complained, so the chickens went to this chicken haven place where it was, the bylaw officer bought 12 chickens for $5 a piece, plus Chris gave all the feed, but 25 chickens came out of that chicken coop. Oh, when we went boating and fishing, one time we went out, and you start going out and you're nice and slow until you get to the end, and then you just hit it, and you go really fast. And when he hit it, all this popping noise came, and it was the rivets on the boat. They were coming out one by one, and the water was coming into the boat, so we hightailed it back, and Chris ran for the truck. We thought we wouldn't get the boat on the trailer before it sunk, but we did. And he ended up selling that boat, and he told the guy it leaked. I think he was surprised. And there was another time, now this is a story that he that he made me promise to I would never tell, and I'm gonna tell it.
Go ahead.
It was the beginning of the year, and so we hadn't gone out in the boat since last year. And so we start going out in the boat, and the water starts coming into the boat. So again, he hightails it and get the boat back on the trailer and everything. He forgot to put the plug in the back of the boat. He didn't want me to tell anybody that. He was loud, and he was boisterous. He even managed to get himself kicked out of our Wednesday night cards, so we didn't have our date night. But he always did love playing cards. And he was a great driver, absolutely great driver. My nieces were up from Florida one time, and they had to leave to go to the airport to catch the plane, and they had a rented car, and my son Paul was behind them, so they were blocked in. Well, Paul couldn't find his keys anywhere. And it was like 6 in the morning, and we're all looking all over for the keys. We can't find the keys, we don't know what to do. So eventually I said, Chris, you gotta do something. He said, what can I do? Like, I don't know where the keys are. He said, can you get the car out? So he managed to get their rental car out between trees, 2 trees in our, on the side of our lot, where you had about an inch maybe on each side, and he got that car out. They got to the airport. They didn't get very far. They met for coffee with Paul. He found his keys. Anyway, he loved to watch TV. He watched TV a lot, and 24/7 really. He's been kind of silent at home. He wanted to watch. He always got something new to do. So when he couldn't be mobile anymore, then he started getting unmobile. That's not a word, sorry. He decided to restore old tractors, and you can see he's very proud in one of the pictures. He rode his tractor in the parade. And then he decided he was gonna get back into shooting rifles. He collected antique rifles, and he went shooting skeet. And he came home and said, my ears are ringing, I can't hear a thing. And he would not admit it, but he never heard after that. He fell off a boat in 2018, and since then it's been gradually downhill, but so it was really hard for him, and in the end he was suffering. I always told him, I said, Chris, write your story down. I don't know your story. He had a big history before me. He said, what, you want me to write my obituary? And I said, well, I don't know. You need to write your story down. He didn't, but he did start it. I gave him lots of books, and he did start a journal. And the last entry he had in it was 2023, pardon me. So 2 years ago, and then he quit writing in it. But the first of it was he was recording his decline in his health. But on August 7th, 2 years ago, he wrote, If weather is humid, as it has been, I get short of breath very easily. Must have oxygen on my dispersal always. Being a farmer, although I don't actively farm anymore, I farm from the seat of my pickup truck. Now I have to say that there have been some years just as good as 2023, but there weren't many much better. If there were, I'd like to have experienced it. I drive through the country farming from left to right, down every highway and concession. I haven't seen a poor crop of anything anywhere. The three major crops this year are fall wheat, excellent, no winter kill anywhere. Soybeans are coming on super, just amazing. Corn, I've never seen corn grow like it did this year. Corn, as the old saying goes, should be knee-high by the 4th of July. This year, it wasn't even halfway to your knees. But makes no matter, in 30 days, July 4th to August 6th, which is 33 days, that corn went from at the most 10 inches tall to 8 feet and tasseled out 90 inches in 33 days, or almost 3 inches a day. Note that only that all crops are even right across the whole acreage on any farm, really good, unbelievable. The market for feeder cattle might hit the roof. And the next entry, he did write one more, was September 1st to the 14th. He said that we had a really great crop of apples at home, and that I made applesauce and a pie. And that's all that I needed to do. I'm happy. I'm gonna steal some words from a friend who sent me a message, and thank you everybody, not just for coming, but thank you for all the messages and the calls and the thoughts, and it's just a really nice turnout for Chris.
That's right.
So as Margaret wrote, always remember, I stole these words from my friend Margaret, always remembered, never forgotten, forever loved, eternally missed. There's maps to the Legion right outside there. I'll get someone to stand at the door maybe and hand them out, because there's so much construction in Port Hope, you can't find your way around. And I've got a nice luncheon up there, and please join me, and thanks for coming. Thank you. I think Jill and Julia, I'm not sure who else, would like to say something. Everybody's invited to. Jill. Thank you.
I will just say, the only thing I'm going to say is that we will always remember Chris with his gardens and how we all benefit from the strawberries, the berries, the beets, corn, everything. And always remember Chris as a gentleman farmer.
Thank you. That's coming from Farmer's Daughter.
Well, good afternoon. I share Nadine's words of thanking you for being here and supporting her. And I hope that my words this afternoon will bring you comfort and a few laughs. And you've certainly added to the grist for the mill about Chris and his farming. As Nadine said, my name is Jill. I'm the third in the parish clan of, I don't know if you know this, but Chris was one of 6. And so when I think of Chris, as you've heard from Reverend King and from Nadine, it's farming, farming, farming. It's also what a hard worker he was. And he was, as has been alluded to, pretty opinionated. But opinionated kind of was maybe a genetic thing, because we had, and this leads me into the parish dinner times. As you can imagine, with a family of 8, with my mom cooking meals every night. There were no men cooking meals at my house. It was Mom. And she was really ahead of her time, because she would make sure that, as per farming, she would have a rainbow on your plate, and it was great. But I also, in reflecting upon Chris, realized that mom and dad were navigating 14 years of children. She had toddlers, brother Bill, Joe, who were 10 and 12 and 14 years. Julie was 7 years younger than Bill. She was not navigating toddlers and teenagers. Can you think of a more insane way to have a family? But we had great times. Chris was the eldest of the pack. So mom and dad were not really mediating bedlam or chaos, but they were amazingly teaching us great table manners, how to pass things, elbows off the table, so we could get by in life. Well, our brother next to Chris was Steve, and I don't know how he got the nickname Queek, but that's what he was called. Now, when you look at toddlers learning language, which I find fascinating, I don't know how he came up with Queek, but it was great, and it stuck. So, in the early days, when we were around the table, I don't know if we were on Hills Road in Ajax or on 104 Admiral, but Steve was not eating his broccoli. And Chris loved to tell this story over and over again, and he was always referred to him as Queek. And my dad said, you know, the children in Africa, it's amazing how things don't change in the world, don't have any food. And Steve, working on his lawyerly chops, said, well, put it in an envelope and send it to Africa. Which sucked the air out of the room, but we all burst out laughing and we thought this was great. But that was one of the stories that Chris would recount all the time about the broccoli. I don't know if Steve is eating broccoli, but I suspect that he may be. But Chris it was just in his genes, and it's pretty hard to imagine how coming from a sort of, semi-suburban, urban background that he became a farmer. But there wasn't a Christmas that went by that, first of all, Christmases at our house were always joyous, that Chris always had Santa bring him something that would recreate a farm. He would recreate it on the living room floor, he would take it to the sandbox, we were all involved, we had silos and barns, and matchbox tractors, and harrows, and harvesters, and God help you if you named them the wrong thing. And I got caught doing that many times. Cartwright's cottage and farming were really key to family life in the summer. Chris would always keep us apprised of the livestock along the road as we were going up to the cottage. One early trip, I remember vividly, Julia was just a baby. She stayed with Grandma Clayton at the cottage. I went along with Brother Steve and Chris to Ottawa, because Dad, as you know, was a real politician. And we visited Parliament Hill. I got in trouble for eating juicy fruit gum, and I probably threw the wrapper on the floor. But the highlight of this trip for Chris was, of course, the experimental farm. He would have been 7 years old. But that was just sort of the long trail of Chris's life in farming. As it happened serendipitously, I don't think it was planned, my grandmother, Clayton, had a cottage, which my brother Bill now has, and there was an empty lot, and my dad built a cottage beside it. Well, the serendipitous part of this is, there was a farmer's field behind us. And Chris was all over that. He was collecting eggs, bringing them home, haying, going to sale barns. I'm sure with Cleve and Lola Endicott, he was negotiating at the sale barn. He was learning all about it. And he went from that as really an apprentice, a farmer apprentice, and farm help, to doing 2 years at the University of Guelph, which, if you know my dad, that would have been a really important thing to have happen. The other thing about this, he was a hard worker. He was haying from morning to night, as Reverend King said. He was doing all of the things that we all are grateful that farmers do. He loved it. Don't get a cow by the wrong name. If you call a Holstein, I don't know, a Charolais, I knew enough that they weren't the same, but you would get rebuked. And you get this look, you get a dumb cough look, and that was done. But while Chris was having his idyllic summer of hard work, I was just lollygagging around Sturgeon Lake, water skiing and swimming. He laid a very strong foundation for his future, but Mama gently reduced her family of 6 to 2 kids staying at the cottage, and oftentimes Steve was staying at the cottage, so there was a smaller group at home. Over the years, I remember Chris having many discussions with Dad about buying heavy equipment. The purchase of a dump truck I particularly remember, because he was really taken with the people around Durham who had these very thriving dirt hauling businesses. Ayers has come to mind. He always had ideas and dreams on the horizon, and personally I admired how he saw various opportunities. Dad, of course, was not of the same mind. He was a bit fiscally conservative, shall we say. So, in my final words, I just want to say, I had a delightful trip. I think Chris must have been on my shoulder as I came across from Ottawa to Muskoka. But part of the delight of that trip is you go through Renfrew County, where there are all kinds of Amish farmers that are tilling the land. The cows are there. They're not the big mega projects that you see with dairy farmers now. And so that was really pretty thrilling to see that. As the years went along, I grew apart from Chris, not so much that I wanted to, but your lives get busy. He was raising families, I was raising a family in Ottawa, and so our time together was getting caught up at Mom and Dad's when they hosted the family Christmases. And that was a really, the house reverberated with all of the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I just wanted to say also, I referenced Brantford County. As I was coming here today, I was going through all of Chris's old haunts. The Breckons, the Bewdleys, the O'Meanys, the, is it Oak Town? No, it isn't. It's Oak something up there on Highway 7. Highway 7 is still Oakwood, right. So, 23 was a good farming year. I think 25 is unbelievable. I just want to say, Chris, the hay is being pulled in buckets and huge bales. The muffins are all over, the big square things, you would correct me, it's what, they're actually rectangles, I guess. So, and the corn is really high, and the farmers markets, it's just amazing. Also, the farm equipment was all over the road. They are huge, but I also saw the old ones that Chris would have used in his early days as a farmer. So it was really, really fun to go through that. And finally, for a man that was so hardworking and physically active and enjoyed his outdoor life, it's hard to see that his boat accident really did rob him of his mobility, so that he wasn't able to fish like he'd like to, livestock, and have his livestock, and all the things that made Chris Chris. That I think that Nadine has given us such a great thumbnail sketch of her life with him, and I thank you for your support and love for him through the last number of years. It's great, and it's great to hear about all the things that you had in common, the carts, the fishing, the farming, terrific. So, I hope there's the best farm ever up there, Chris, because you'll be in heaven if that's the case. Thank you. And thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I'm Julia. I'm the youngest sister of Chris. As you know, Chris was my oldest brother. He was almost 7 years older than me when I was born. So there's a lot of things he was way ahead of me when I came along. He had a real tease bug in him, and he used to call me, because I was a little bit chunky, he used to call me Best Pocket Emmy. It drove me nuts. And it was a reference to one of my parents' friend who was a rather large woman. I also remember the time that he was left in charge of us. It was Steve, Jill, and myself, and he was looking after us. He had the dog running through the living room at high speeds doing circles, and the three of us jumping up and down on the couch. And I was thinking at the time, and I was pretty little, I was thinking, perhaps this isn't a good idea that he looks after us. Chris loved family pictures. Everywhere we go, my mom at one point would get us all to stand and have our picture taken. The picture was be taken, click, and my mom would be very happy, and then the pictures came back developed. My mom was not happy because in every single picture, Chris would do this. Drove her crazy. During those same years, and this was all done at 104 Admiral Road, he liked to play Nicky Nicky Nine Doors. I don't know where he got it, but he got somebody's kerchief all the time. He'd put it on his head and dance in the streets, knocking on doors, thinking he was disguised as a young woman. He'd never be caught. I don't know where my parents were, but I was maybe 2 or 3, and I was out in the dark, and I think, boy, oh boy, who was in charge of me at these times? I'm also remembering the time him walking across the street on Admiral Road with a bow and arrow, or possibly a gun. He was out in the wilds of Admiral Road hunting, or he'd gone fishing. It is also at this time he discovered a passion, a path that lasted throughout his entire life, and Jill spoke of this too, farming. There was a farm, as Jill mentioned, close to our family cottage. Chris one day went up and asked the farmer if he needed any help, and that's when he met Steve Endicott and his wife. He would eventually spend many summers living with the Endicotts. Clive taught him everything he knew about farming: cattle, chickens, crops, tractors, and for Chris's 16th birthday, Clive gave him his first cow. My girlfriends all of a sudden, as I got older, became very interested in visiting me a lot at my house. I found out it was not me they were really visiting, it was my good-looking older brother. I think Chris was 7 years older than me. I don't know when he moved out, but it was probably, he wasn't all that old. They were pretty young when they started getting the goo-goo eyes going. I couldn't believe it. I have to talk to him later. When Chris broke his first hip, I would visit him more often than I ever had before. Because as you know, we all go our separate ways from families. We get our own families, we get busy. I had retired, and I liked visiting him. I got to know him. We had long conversations, mostly one-sided conversations, because whether you're on the phone with Chris or you're in person with Chris, he did the talking. You just had to listen. And if you said something that he did not agree about, you should just leave the house immediately, because you were an idiot. That's all you were. My favorite memory, I think, is when Chris called me up one day and asked me if I would like to go to the sales barn with him. I guess it was our first date as brother and sister. I drove to Port Hope, and he was sitting in his truck waiting for me, and off we went to Woodville. We went down into the Woodville area where they sold cattle, and he sat there and he watched the cattle, and he talked to me about what was wrong with that cow, how much that cow should get. It was fascinating. I loved it. The smell of the barn, the people. You could see on his face that this is just true love for him. When I talked to Chris last Wednesday, before he passed, I asked him if he thought he would be able to go home again. He said to me, I don't think so. But I've had a good life. I've made mistakes, but I've had a good life. And I thought to myself, what a wonderful way to feel about your life and yourself at such a critical time in your life. And I want to say something too, and we teased Nadine a lot about this. When Nadine married Chris, we all went, thanks Nadine, you're saving the other women in the world. He's off the field. But Nadine, you were such a wonderful person to Chris. He loved you. You took such great care of him. I don't know what he would have done if he hadn't have met you, but we are so thankful that he did. And I just wanted to say to Chris, rest in peace and without pain, Chris. Thank you.
Whatever the nature of your memories are, may they, the passing of time and the faith that is uniquely yours, give you comfort and assurance, a promise that good awaits those who have lived full and blessed lives. I'd like to end our time in much the same way that we began it, with a poem. A farmer's life, a tale untold, of sunbaked fields and stories bold. From dawn's first light till evening close, he tends the land where bounty grows. With calloused hand and heart so true, he works the earth a steadfast view. He watches skies a hopeful gaze, for rain to bless the fertile maize. The farmer's life, a humble heart, a vital role, a work of heart. So to this farmer we now bid adieu and thank him most for who he was and what he knew, of life and love, heart and soul, of dreams and visions, all his day through. Farewell, rest well, Chris. You have left an indelible mark on the hearts of so many. May we all meet again. As Nadine has indicated, a lunch follows at the Lions Center, and there are maps to help you get there.
Lions or Legion. It's actually the Port Hope Legion.
Legion. I shouldn't miss the Lions and Legions together. On that note, we'll hope to see you then. Good afternoon.
Thank you.